Hello everyone and welcome back to English with Kayleigh. In today's video we're going to take a look at another one of Jackie Kay's poems entitled Pork Pies. And if you are taking the A-level Cambridge examination, this particular poem actually came up in the June 2021 exam, but of course you should still prepare yourself for it because it could come up again. So at the end we'll take a look through the question that they asked in the previous year. So, pork pies, first of all I'm going to read it for you and then we'll get into the analysis. Pork pies, we're not together anymore. After Bobby Baxter followed us home, drank our pop and ate our mini pork pies. He had 5. Our whole life changed. We kept him in our room upstairs, taught him our special tongue, watched him flash up on television. Missing 3 days, 4 days, 6, 7. On the last day at 90 degrees Fahrenheit, Robert James Baxter looked out our high window and waved. He had been warned, bad Bobby, and some ugly nosy Parker looked up. Some pain in the neck village golfer, putt, 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 999, a hole in 1. Next thing, a policeman at our door. Our mum there in her brassiere. The loose language of gin, opening and closing her mouth, her eyes narrow and fierce as a bird's, a seagull's fury, calling us down, calling us down. Hannah and Helen, never Helen and Hannah. We dressed in the same black patent leather shoes, shining like mirrors. Our checked gingham dresses, its pink and green squares. Our jet black hair parted in the same centre, our East Coast identical accents well spoken. The village plodder held the picture in the air. Have you seen this boy? No, sir, we said together. Pause. No, sir. Big boys in blue searched our room, but Bobby Baxter, beautiful Bobby Baxter, wasn't found till 5 days later. So the topic is of course about the kidnapping of a child, and some of the themes that Kay explores are lies, kidnapping, possibly murder. This one is left with a question mark at the end of the poem, and this idea of control versus the unmanaged. So the structure, we have 8 quatrains and the tone is quite dark and cunning. It shows the cunning and deceitful reality of the narrator as they go so far as to lie to the authorities. So a few notes on this particular poem. It comes from Kay's collection of Other Lovers in 1993, which focuses very heavily on relationships. Which is quite important because in this poem we see the relationship between 2 siblings, 2 twins, and also their relationship with Bobby Baxter and also the relationship with their mum. And then pork pies, this actually has a layered meaning because it's literally a quintessential British food. You saw a picture of it in the first slide. And the darker meaning is if somebody says to tell a porky pie, it means to tell lies. So a slightly darker connotation there. Now, what's quite important about this is this book and this collection was released in September of 1993. In February of 1993, a 10-year-old John Venables, he was arrested along with Robert Thompson for the very sad kidnapping and murder of a 2-year-old child, and this was in February 20th of 1993. So this was something that was very fresh in the memory of Kay and of British society at the time. It was a very shocking and saddening event that happened. So this is definitely something you could tie in when looking at AO5. It is something real that happened around the time of Kay writing the poem and releasing it. So there are a lot of questions that came to light after the John Venables case and also throughout Jackie Kay's poem that we're conflicted with and questions that are raised. what is the age of criminal responsibility? In the UK at the time, it was 10 years old, so the two boys were tried and tested as adults. And then the other question is, why would children commit horrific acts upon fellow children? So before we actually get into the analysis stanza by stanza, first of all, it's very important to look at the use of the collective pronouns throughout the poem. So we see we, us, and our several times throughout the poem, really heightening and emphasizing this inseparable nature of the twins. We get that idea because of Hannah and Helen, and the fact that they wear the same things and they have identical accents lends itself to the idea that they are twins. They are inseparable, and then we see this thing of we're not together anymore, and that lends itself to the idea that they've been separated after they've been caught, or the question and the separation between them and Bobby Baxter. So we do get this team of blame, that they are equal in what they've done, in the crime they've committed. Okay, so let's get into the analysis of the stanzas then. So as I said, pork pies, just the title in itself, it has this connotation, this colloquial saying of porcupines means telling lies, and throughout the poem we see this kind of fragility of innocence, and the breakdown of this crime and what the twins have done. We're not together anymore. So again, as I just said, we're left to question here, is this the separation from Bobby, or is it the separation from each other? We know that by the end we see the separation of them and Bobby. After Bobby Baxter followed us home, it's quite interesting that they've used followed us. This obviously really distanced themselves from the crime and from the responsibility. Drank our pop and ate our mini pork pies. And this again could have a layered meaning of a literal thing of they fed him pork pies, but also metaphorically they fed him lies in order to keep him there. He had 5. Our whole life changed, and we have this enjambment here to reflect time and the changes that are going to happen for the twins. We kept him in our room upstairs, taught him our special tongue. Language is very characteristic of Kayleigh's work. It's of great importance, that really relies on the identity of the speaker, and emphasizes that. So language often creates identity and bonds. So they're bonding with Bobby and teaching him how to talk to them. So this could lend itself to the idea that the child is very young, and that he's unable to express himself. So they're teaching him ways to communicate with them. Watched him flash up on television, missing 3 days, 4 days, 6, 7. So we see the pace pick up here. This omitting of words really shows how quickly this is escalating. And of course, we know that pace is vital in kidnapping cases. They need to find the person within the first, they say the first 48 hours is crucial. On the last day at 90 degrees Fahrenheit, so this is 32 degrees Celsius, so it's quite hot. So we get this idea, this foreshadowing of things that are heating up, lies are coming to the surface. Robert James Baxter, and that's the first time we hear his whole name, so where he's actually, given an identity, looked out of our high window and waved. He had been warned. Now this has a much more sinister and threatening tone to it, and does this then foreshadow what's to come? Bad Bobby. And this is very typical of Kay's work when a child's voice narrates. So this again is quite important. If you have a question that looks at how is it characteristic of Kay's work, when she uses a child's voice, which she does frequently, and especially throughout the A-level selection, she uses very simple vocabulary, good and bad, to show a contrast. And she often uses the kind of consonant sounds and the plosive sounds when a young person is feeling anger, when they're angry. And some ugly nosy Parker. So again, the word choice and the tone reflects the narration of a child. And again, ugly nose Parker is quite colloquial and something that people often use in Britain to say somebody who's being nosy and wants to know more about a situation. So at this point, we're seeing a narration, a clear narration, again quite characteristic of Kay's work. So the first thing we see is that Bobby Baxter is taken home, and then Bobby Baxter waves to somebody from the window. And this is where we have the turn of events and the turn in the story. So again, we have enjambment from looked up. So obviously this reflects the physical movement of the person looking up, but also the realization that they've been found out. Some pain in the neck, village golfer. Again, very colloquial, using derogatory terms and swear words, really. Pain in the neck. Quite typical of younger people in Britain. Putt, 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 999, a hole in one. Quite comedic from Kay here. And she uses here an epizeusis, which is the omission of certain words. So she puts, repeated words in concession very quickly. Putt, putt, putt. This means, again, he's calling immediately. Straight away, he's calling 999. And then we've got this comedic thing of a hole in one. He's found it out and he's going to report it. Next thing, the policeman at our door. So again, showing this quick succession. So not only of the police moving quite quickly, but also of the girls having to move quickly. So we see the pace of the story and the timeline of events is picking up. The policeman at our door, our mum out there in her brassiere. So we get the characterization of the mother here. Of course, this is quite shocking for the reader that a mum would open the door to the policeman in her underwear, but it doesn't seem to be shocking for the speaker. It just seems to be fact or the norm for them, which lends itself to the kind of environment the twins have been brought up in. And again, that goes back to the very first question I said, who carries the responsibility when children do carry out these acts? The loose language of Jin, opening and closing her mouth, her eyes narrow and fierce as a bird's, a seagull's fury. So the loose language of Jin, we get the idea that she's drunk, and then we get all of the semantic field of violence and quite an aggressive person, fierce as a bird's, a seagull's fury. And a seagull's fury, you can see the picture just there. It was a Navy fighter plane. So again, really emphasizing this aggression, this aggressive nature of the mum who's obviously been drinking. Calling us down. I get that repetition being used to emphasize the anger and the importance of this event. Also, what's very important is to look at what's not been mentioned, which is often, again, quite characteristic of Kay's work, what's been left out. The fact that there's no mention of the father, it lends itself to the idea there's an absent father, but of course a mother who is also absent in the way of she's been drinking. So is she looking after her children? How have they managed to keep a child up in their bedroom for so many days without the mum even going to check on them? So again, getting this question of who's actually to blame, really. Hannah and Helen, never Helen and Hannah. So in this stanza, we get a description of the girls, and we get the typical schoolgirl uniform, which is in the UK, which is the checked gingham dress. And I've got a picture there. So we do get the idea again that these girls are particularly young and need guidance. And then we have this beautiful simile, shining like mirrors. And of course, mirrors are quite symbolic in literature to mean the truth, the honest or real reflection, something that doesn't lie, which of course juxtaposes the girls and what they're about to do. So at this point now, the narration has moved on and the police have arrived, and we can see that the mother has been drinking. Our jet black hair parted in the same centre. So again, we have this idea of the same, identical, equal in blame and responsibility. Our East Coast identical accents, well spoken. And this is quite important because again, it lends itself to the characterization of the twins. Intelligence is obviously emphasized here, but also this idea of the ability to manipulate and the ability to be seen and being accepted as, socially upright standing citizens. The village plodder, so this is just a term we use for policeman. So again, using that really authentic voice that we often see in Kay's work, held the picture in the air. Have you seen this boy? So we've got this short question here, interrogative, very much to the point. No, sir, we say together. Pause. No, sir. So here is where we get the reference back to the title as well, for its metaphorical meaning of telling lies, tell a porcupine. Then we see lots of consonant sounds coming through with the B, the plosive B, so big boys in blue searched our room, but Bobby Baxter, beautiful Bobby Baxter. But the plosive B serves a different purpose here. So of course, number one, it's to show the speed and the act of the search from the police. And there's also a very interesting choice word here of beautiful, the word they're using to describe Bobby. And we have to think about how it reflects the possible feelings of the speaker or speakers. And we're left with this final sentence, wasn't found till 5 days later. A very ambiguous ending, no resolution or kind of wrap up. We're not told if he's found alive. There is a possibility that he's found dead, and that's why, the theme of murder is possibly in there. And also given the case that happened with John Venables, where it lends itself to the idea that he was possibly found dead. But we're not sure of that. Again, something which is quite characteristic of Kay's work in not having a kind of resolution or wrap up, more something for us to discover and to consider in our minds. So in terms of narration, we get the speaker's lie. That's kind of the climax of the story, that they tell the lie, the porcupine, and then finally Bobby is found. So as I said, this was actually a June 2021 exam question from Cambridge. So this is the question. So you always have two question types. One is more of an umbrella question where you have to look at 3 different poems from the selection. This one looks at mothers in particular. And then you've got B, write a critical appreciation of the following poem, considering in what ways it's characteristic of Kay's poetic methods and concerns here and elsewhere in the selection. And then it gives you the poem there. So that's the question. And so when you go through the analysis, you really need to think about how is it characteristic of Kay's work. So maybe looking at voice, characterization. We've seen different voices coming through, different themes and topics. So the examiner's comments were, there was a good critical appreciation of pork pies, demonstrated engagement and evident enjoyment of this poem. Candidates commented on the seagull's fury, so that's that navy plane that we spoke about, and how the mother was presented as a scavenger, with some sound connections to other poems in the collection. Better answers were very clever in selecting words and selections from the text. They applied insightful personal responses and evaluated varying opinions of the work. One effective answer explored many key elements of the poem with perception and a lucid sense of tone, and how Kay uses the child's view of a horrific event, which we do see in some of her other works. We even see in Teeth, we see the viewpoint of a young boy as his mum is being attacked. Less successful answers tended to misunderstand the premises behind the poem, and there were several significant examples of misreading and of candidates approaching the poem as though it were previously unseen. I've seen this last comment on several of the examiner's comments now, saying that it's as if people are approaching it as an unseen text. So it's really important to go through these videos and make sure that you have a really deep understanding of not only the story, but what techniques are being used to achieve CAIE's message. So in terms of AO5, of course, we've got David Paddy, and the identity is a process of choices. And we could also mention what CAIE says about, the biological relationship, and that the umbilical cord is actually quite nonsense. Of course, you can bring in the John Venables crime, which one of our students did when they sat the exam last year, and they got an AO5 mark for that. And also you can relate back to other poems like Got You and the sibling relationship that they have. So I hope this video has been helpful. Please don't forget to like and subscribe for more English learning videos, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye guys.